Do you struggle with lust? Do you struggle with the addiction of pornography? Maybe you're here because you're completely down the wrong path and this is your last resort to try and get out of it. Or maybe you're just at the lowest of the spectrum and you just need a little bit of help having a revelation how to get out of this or how to stay out of this. This is the revelation for you. This is the series for you. I'm making this a series because there's a lot more to this than just one little episode that just gives you a clue of how to do this. Personally, if you haven't seen my first episode, I was a pornography addict for 7 years of my life, and everything that I'm teaching here is how I'm teaching you how I got it in the revelations that I heard that got me out of my addiction. So anyway, stay tuned to this little series that I will be explaining and teaching this. Welcome back to episode number 2. My name is Hudson Funk, and if you haven't caught the intro, which I hope you did at least, I am speaking about the addiction of pornography, or specifically lust, defeating lust once and for all. And anyway, yesterday I went through some statistics that I wanted to get across, but today I'm going to really try and get into some of the meat here, because I know people aren't watching this just try and just hear a lot of the statistics. They want to learn how to get out of this, and I'm not here to waste your time. I want to teach you. I want to get you out of this, because this is an addiction that is consuming people. It's killing people. People don't realize it, but this is an addiction that subtly takes you over, and eventually you're caught in it and you didn't even realize it. That's kind of how it happened for me. But anyways, so yesterday I was specifically talking about some statistics, and then I started very briefly talking about the root of the problem, or pieces of the problem. And anyway, the first thing that I really want to talk about today is, if you are addicted to pornography like I was, there are 2 things that you have to figure out first before you start really getting out of this. Well, the first thing that you got to do is admit that you have a problem, okay? You're addicted, you have a problem. The first step is taking accountability. If you always blame it on somebody else, if you're always the victim of a situation, you're never going to get out of it. Click off this video, because you aren't going to get better. There's no point in even watching this. But if you have finally taken accountability and you realize that you are in here for whatever circumstances, that you do have a problem and that you can change it, you have a much more significant chance of getting out of this. That is the first step. But the second step, now you have to realize, is you have to discern, is this a physical addiction, or is this a spiritual aspect? And a lot of people that doesn't go a lot of people's minds very well. But in Jesus' ministry, when he healed people, over 50% of all of Jesus' healings that are recorded in Scripture, he had to cast out a demon first. And I'm not preaching on healing or all of that, or laying on hands of anything, but I'm specifically talking about, I'm just trying to make the point that there are more aspects than just to the physical. This is one reason why I hate modern day rehab. If you're a drug addict, you go to rehab and they just get you addicted to something else, but as long as it's not addicted to what you came here for. If you're addicted to whatever, some type of drug, let's just go with fentanyl. I don't know if I'll get banned for saying that, but let's say you're addicted to fentanyl and you go to rehab, they'll get you off of fentanyl, but most of the modern day rehabs, the secular rehabs, they just get you unaddicted to that and get you addicted to something else. I know someone very close to me who just went to rehab for alcohol, being an alcoholic, and they just made them addicted to sugar. They just made them addicted to drinking pop and soda. And you didn't get rid of the problem. It was a heart issue. You have to figure out if this is a spiritual issue or if this is a heart issue, if this is an addictive heart issue. For me, again, if you haven't listened to a little bit of my testimony, I'm going to get into more of it today. I was exposed to pornography when I was around 8 years old. And I had been doing stuff before that already, from probably like ages of 5 to the time that I started watching pornography, which is just crazy, but that's just the truth. And from the ages of 10 to the ages of 17, I was addicted to pornography, and that was me personally. I had conformed my mind, I had conformed my heart to this world to the point that I had just addicted my heart to pornography. I had addicted my heart to the whole lust aspect. And if you do that, the other aspect of the spiritual aspect doesn't apply to you. And the point that I'm trying to get at is some people, when they get addicted to something, some people, it's just a spirit that comes upon them and they're just addicted. Like, I know some people who get addicted to alcohol. I know one person, not personally, but I know one person who was addicted to drugs, and they had gone to a conference, and the very same day, they'd been addicted to these drugs for like the last 6 to 8 years of their life, like completely consumed. And they went up and got prayer, and they got set free of their addiction immediately. But the next day they had incredible withdrawals. So they went back, they got prayer, and they got set free of their withdrawals. In that sense, I believe that was a spiritual aspect where they were just spiritually consumed and they got that demon cast out of them. But then you can have a demon cast out of you, but you also got to deal with the withdrawals. Your body has been now dependent on it for so long, especially with pornography. Your body can become so dependent on those dopamine strikes, on those adrenaline highs and those dopamine highs, that your body now becomes, it goes through withdrawals. So you have to deal with the physical aspect either way, but you need to first discern if this is a spiritual, how you got into this, was it spiritual or physical. Sadly, I was a physical person. I got into this through the physical. If it was spiritual, I would have gotten out of it a lot quicker and a lot easier. But for me, it was physical. And sadly, when you do something for so long, you just conform everything, you just conform your heart to that pattern, and it becomes slowly a little bit harder for you to get out of it, it seems like. But I guarantee you, if you learn this revelation, which I'm going to share, and you persist in it, and you stick to some of the things that help, you will get out of it. There's no questions asked, period. I guarantee you, I'll put my life on that. But anyway, so the first two things that you got to do is realize that you are accountable, that you have a problem. And the second one is you got to figure out if this is a spiritual or if this is a heartfelt addiction, that you have just conformed your flesh, you have conformed your body to the image of this world, and that you are just now addicted. And the third thing that I want to point out is with pornography, it is all in here. The whole issue of your addiction, of my addiction, it was all right here. This was the problem. I was the problem. The biggest person, the biggest enemy that I had was the one that I faced in the mirror. This was my issue. And anyway, I'm gonna say something here, but I'm gonna say a couple things here, and then I'm gonna move on to the very revelation that got me set free from this. But I mentioned this very briefly yesterday, but it goes on to say in James chapter 1, verse 13, I'm going to go through verse 15. Let no man say when he is tempted, and that word, I said this yesterday, but that same word tempted in the Greek means tested or trial. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempts he any man. So first thing up, you got to realize that God is not testing you, God is not tempting you, God is not putting this addiction on you, God is not testing you to see how well and how faithful you're going to be. He's not doing any of that. The scripture says out of John chapter 10, verse 10, the thief cometh only to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that you may have life and have it abundantly. This addiction that you are dealing with, the lust aspect, all of it is from the devil, period. God is not allowing it. God is not making it happen. The devil is not God's messenger boy, okay? God has nothing to do with this. He is trying to get you out of this, okay? That is one of the other things that you have to realize. Verse 14, but every man is tempted or tested when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. And I'm not going to go into everything I said yesterday. You're going to have to go watch that. And verse 15, this is the one I want to get to. Then, when lust has conceived, it bringeth forth sin. And sin, when it is finished, brings forth death. You cannot commit a sin in this mortal body without first being conceived in here, in your emotions, in your desires. And again, that word lust there, I had mentioned it yesterday, that the word lust we use as the sexual, lust for other people, the sexual immorality that we use, again, for other people. But the word lust, that is really the definition of lust, is just an extreme desire. And that could be that, really, if you're going to take it in that way, sin is conceived in your emotions, in your desires. Your hormones go haywire. You start thinking about it, but I'm going to, for the sake of my teaching, I'm going to use it for the term that we use it, the lust of a sexual immorality towards other people. Let me ask you a question. If you are to commit fornication, or you're going to go have premarital sex with somebody, or commit a sexual immoral act with another person, or not even that, even go and do, in this case, pornography. If you're going to go and have, if you're going to participate in this addiction, you have to first think about it in your mind before you can do it in your body. And again, I didn't really ask the question. The question I'm trying to ask here is, can you go and commit lust with somebody else, or lust for somebody else, without thinking it first? And I hope your answer is no. You cannot lust for somebody else without first thinking it in your imagination. Hebrews chapter 10 is another scripture that is huge when it comes to this. Hebrews chapter 10 verses 15, and I'm going to go, Hebrews chapter 11 verse 15, and it goes on to say, I'm going to start in verse 13. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. And this is speaking of Adam and Eve, not Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah. For verse 14, for they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. Verse 15, this is huge, okay? And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. This is again speaking of Abraham and Sarah. And when God told Abraham and Sarah to leave the country that they're coming out of, I think it was, I'm not going to be able to pronounce the name of it. He told them to leave a country and go seek out a new one that his descendants would eventually inherit forever, the children of Israel. And that's where the whole, promise came to him about the children of Israelites. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to get at to is Jesus is saying right here that when Abraham and Sarah, when they left their country, they were doing okay in their country. They were prospering a decent degree. They were having food, and in those days, prosperity was lots of cattle, lots of animals, lots of crops. They were doing decently well. They were playing it safe, and they were doing good. And when God told them to leave, I'm sure there was a fear of failure. There's a fear of not being able to make it. And he goes on to say again here, if they had been mindful of the country from whence they came out of, from where they came from, they might have had opportunity to have returned. And the point that I'm trying to get to is you cannot be tempted with something that you do not think about. If I was going to leave my country, and if I had it in the back of my mind, but I was doing so good in that country, I was doing so good over there, I had cattle, and I had, security, and I was safe over there. Now I have nothing. Now there's no guarantee. There's no security here. There's no guarantee. There's no, firm place that I'm going to be okay. If they had been mindful of that, they would have had opportunity to have returned. But because they weren't mindful of it, because there was no thought of it in their imagination, because they had no depict image of it, they couldn't have had opportunity to have returned. They couldn't be tempted to return. So another thing that you have to realize is, a lot of this whole pornography issue, if you could just cut off this right here, you wouldn't have to deal with this issue, which is very hard when you have an addictive heart. When you have done it for 7 years like me, it's dang near impossible because I've conformed my heart so long that it's just a part of my heart. It's a part of me. I just think about it all the time. And I'm going to get further into that too. I'm running out of time here a little bit. But I thought about it all of the time, and it's because I had conformed my heart to pornography. I had looked at it so much that it had vexed my soul. The scripture says that, I believe it's 2 Peter, or maybe it's 1 Peter. Maybe I'll flip over there sooner or later. But it goes on to say that Lot vexed his righteous right soul from seeing and hearing from day to day. I didn't quote that perfectly. But Lot was Abraham's nephew, and he had gone into Sodom. And Abraham had told Lot, he said, okay, pick any country that you see here, pick where you want to go. And Lot had said, okay, Sodom looks pretty good. That looks okay over there. I think I can do well over there. I'm going to go there. And Abraham said, okay, you go over there, you'll do all right. And if you know anything about the book of Genesis, and about Sodom and Gomorrah, you'll realize that that became a very immoral country. There was the homosexuality that blew up in that country was disgusting. Those two cities became so disgusting and so immoral that it had to be destroyed. It just had to. There was no way around it. The new covenant came through yet. There was no antidote for these people. They had to be destroyed in order to save the rest of the body that was there. And anyway, so Lot lived in Sodom. And it says in 2 Peter or 1 Peter, again, I might go flip over there and find it quickly. And it says, in seeing and in hearing, Lot vexed his righteous soul from day to day. Seeing and hearing, he vexed his soul. And if you don't understand spirit, soul, and body, the soulish part of you is the mental, emotional part of you. Your will, your ability, your personality. The person that you look at right now is my body part. The soulish part of me is my personality, who I am, the person that, I interact with people. And the spiritual part of me is the person that the scripture says, the person that I can't perceive. Anyway, I'm not going to preach on that right now. I just did an entire series on that. But I vex my soul. The soulish part of you is the problem. The body is always going to be a problem. The flesh is always going to be a problem. The scripture says that the flesh is enmity against the carnal mind is enmity against the spirit. And it cannot be subject unto the spirit, neither indeed can be. That comes out of Romans. it will never be able to be subject unto the Spirit of God. The carnal part of you, the sinful, fallen part of you cannot become spiritual. So what is the issue? It's the soulish part of you that has to become spiritual. It is the soulish part of you that has to agree with the Spirit in order to overcome the body. That is the revelation that you need. And I'm going to get further in that. But the point that I wanted to make today is that it has to first get through here before it can come through here. It has to first, again, in James chapter 1, verses 15 goes on to say, again, that it has to be conceived. Lust has to be conceived before it gives birth to sin. Your pornography addiction, anytime you go and commit this pornography addiction, or you go out and whatever, masturbate, or you go and commit fornication or adultery with someone else, any sexual immorality act, it has to first go through here. You have to first imagine it and conceive it first in your imagination before you can play it out in your mind. And if you could cut that off, you could cut the stem or the cell or the bloodline that makes those thoughts, you would get rid of all of your problems. That would be the very beginning and the root of your problems. But again, if you've been addicted for 7 years, that's dang near impossible. You have another revelation that you need, which I'm going to get into. But one of the other things that I want to talk about is 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19, which I mentioned yesterday briefly. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18, sorry. And you know, fornication is the only sin in the Bible that it tells you to flee from. You know, every other sin, the scripture says out of James chapter 4, verse 7, resist the devil and he shall flee. And that applies to a lot of areas. But you know, you can resist the devil to a very strong degree. But fornication, sexual immorality is the one sin that God tells you to flee from. It goes on to say, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 18, flee fornication. Every sin that a man doth is without the body, but he that commits fornication sinneth against his own body. And you know, for me, when I was addicted to pornography, I was a big runner, and I'd often go on runs. And you know, if you don't know David Goggins, he's and yeah, I'm not going to go into talk about him, but he's awesome. He's a very disciplined man, and I would call it the David Goggins attitude. And I would get all fired up while I'm running, and I'd feel all good about myself, and I'd feel like I'm doing something with my life. And I would say, devil, try me today. You can't even get me. You can't even touch me with pornography. You can't do nothing. I'd say, test me. And I'd be on a 4-day streak or something like that. And that is the very night that I would fall from it, not because I was fleeing from it, because I would go into the shower or whatever, and I would try and fight that thought. I would try and fight the temptation of doing it. I would try and fight it. And personally, you can't fight it, okay? You can't fight fornication. It is easier to just run away and flee from it than to ever fight it. But you know what? Eventually, you can't run away from something forever. Because if you have a heart attitude, if you have an addictive heart, again, this is one thing, again, I hate with modern day rehab, is they get you, and they may get you away from your addiction that might kill you, but they just addict you to something else. They never deal with the root problem of it, which is your heart. And I am going to tell you how to get into that. I'm just establishing some first degrees why you have this issue, why your heart has become such an addictive heart. It's because you've let it be that way. You have leavened the lump. You know, the scripture says, don't you know that a leaven leaveneth the whole lump? All you got to do is let one spark enter that fire. All you got to do is let a little leaven enter into the lump, and the entire lump of dough becomes leavened. You just got to do it once, and boom. But you can cancel out that problem. But if you don't, and you do it over and over and over again, you eventually you conform your heart. Nobody else does it for you. You conform your heart to this addictive attitude of being addicted to pornography. And it all starts through here. It has to get through here before you can, again, commit it in your physical body. And you know, the scripture goes on to say, I'm running out of time here, so I'm just going to kind of wrap this up quickly. And then on tomorrow's episode, I'll get into the extra meat of this, the very revelation that you'll need that's going to deal with this heart issue that dealt with my heart issue. I'll get into more of my testimony. But you know, the scripture says that if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and chuck it out, because it'd be better for you to enter into heaven maimed than to burn in the fire. And he goes on to say, if your right arm causes you to sin, cut it off and chuck it away. It's better for you to go into heaven amputated than to burn. And you know, that struggled with me, because if we all did that, I think we'd all probably be dead and amputated a lot of our parts. But the point that he was making there, if something is causing you to sin, cut it off. And again, for me, the internet is what made me sin. And I built an algorithm on my Instagram that all I was seeing was girls, things that made me lust. And again, too, my personal testimony is I also was, sadly, a little bit of a player. I'm not proud of that at all. And I got a lot of my arousalment from other girls in real life. And that was also a huge problem, is because I would practice my own addiction. I would practice it and I would act it out daily basis. On a daily basis, I would do this. And when you combine internet and all these things, those are the reasons why I'm lusting. Those are the reasons why I'm committing these addictions. But you know what? Even then, I'd gotten to the point, again, I was 14 to 17. I tried with everything I had to get out of that addiction. And I'll go into that tomorrow. But tomorrow, I'll get into more of that. And I tried with everything that I had to get out of it. And I mean everything. And I got away from Instagram. I cut off Instagram. I cut off all the girls. This is how dedicated I was. I deleted Snapchat after a while. I deleted it. I cut off all areas of my ability to lust and to see something that would make me lust. And you know what? Because my heart was so addictive, that didn't help. And a lot of people, this is where your problem needs to start. This is where your issue needs to start. You need to cut it off as much as you can. And even though I say that it didn't help that much, which it didn't because I still had an addictive heart, it cut off the issue. It cut off planting more seeds into my heart. It cut off my visualization. It cut off my imagination to seeing it and planting new seeds into my heart. So one of the very first things that you got to realize is, again, you have to take accountability. You have to take accountability that this is an addiction, that you have a problem. And you have to realize that it is all in here. You have to cut off this. And if there's something that is making you get into it, if there's something that is prolonging you into it, you need to take discipline and take it now and cut it off as much as you can. If your right eye causes you to sin, cut it off and take it out. But for me, that wasn't enough. I still had an addictive heart. Those were good first steps, and it did help to a degree. It cut off my imagination. But for me, that wasn't enough. I still had an addictive heart. I heard many people preach on this very same thing. Cut it off. Cut Instagram out. If something is causing you to sin, do it. And I did, but it didn't help. So what was the revelation that I needed to hear that got me out of this? And I'm going to explain that tomorrow. So stay tuned for the rest of this episode or the rest of this series. Have a great rest of your day. God bless.